Okay, so my plan for this build is I'm going to take a shovel handle, cut it down the size, and this one has a notch, so I'll cut it off and cut the rest of it the size. File it down, slash sand and cut, or whatever I use, chisel, however it said to do it, to the shape I want. Then for the upright handle, I'm going to use just a 1/2-inch bolt on either side. These 1/2-inch fender washers, kind of helping hold it to the board with probably a bit of epoxy in it. And then that will be wrapped with paracord and covered with fiberglass resin to make it a little more rigid. I don't quite know how well this is going to go. In theory, these shovel handles are made of hardwood. I think oftentimes like ash or hickory, which can both take a beating. And I tested out some of these and just some old ones I had lying around that are half dry rotted and, old. Smacked them against the anvil and they still took a few hits to break. And they were a lot thinner than this one is. But I will file it down to, of course, thin it. However, I will leave part of it wider where the bolt goes through just to give it a little more stability, I guess. But yeah, that's my basic plan. Let's get into the video. Or not the video, you're already watching the video. Let's get into the build. So I'm gonna start by measuring out how much of the handle I want. On average, these seem to be about 24 inches long, so that's what I'm gonna make mine. Going from there, and then marking 24. Probably not the most ideal way to cut it, but I got it cut. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a rasp and kind of thin it out a little bit, give it a little more shape. I plan on using this as kind of my front piece, so I'll have it kind of tapered there, and then I'll thin out the rest from there. Oh, that wasn't so tough, she says after sanding on the thing for 30 minutes. And now I'm going to go to my belt sander and kind of smooth everything out, get the rest of the urethane coating off that. I don't want that on there because I'll add my own finish later. Okay, now that we have that shaped, took a little bit longer than I would have hoped, but that's what happens sometimes with this hardwood. It can take quite a bit before it actually goes the shape you want, even with some pretty heavy files. But now what I'm going to do is I filed one spot just a little bit flatter, kind of along here, and what I'm just going to find exactly where I want my side handle to go, and I'm going to drill a hole that fits my 1/2-inch bolt, which that'd be like a 1/2-inch hole. Okay, now that we have our hole already drilled in, our bolt usually would just sit in there, and I was going to put a bolt on either side, but I don't have enough threads over here. So what I'm going to do is take, I don't know where I set it, but I have a 1/2-inch die somewhere. And so I'm going to take it and extend the threads of this up to where I have it on both sides. I'm not going to film that because that's going to be very boring to watch. So after making very little progress on trying to tap that, I ended up breaking my die. So yeah, that didn't work. So I basically had a couple options after this. I could either try getting a different die and doing the same thing again, which I think more than likely I'm just breaking another one, which just wastes, a die. I could try to find a bolt that's threaded all the way up, which is what I was originally going to do, because since this is going to be wrapped in paracord, it doesn't actually have to be, smooth. But these are all I could find, where they were threaded up about an inch or so, and then they were smooth. So that really didn't work. And after trying to think of how am I actually going to get this to work, I came up with just getting, if I can get it on camera, threaded rod. 1/2 inch, same size. Only thing is it doesn't have a bolt head on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the head of them by using regular washers and, see over here, just a couple 1/2 inch nuts. And that'll kind of give me the grip to keep my hand from sliding off the top. I can also cut this to be a little longer, so I figure this is probably my best option. A little probably more expensive than just using bolts, so if you can find a bolt that's of the size you need that's actually threaded as enough, that is probably cheaper, especially because these are sold like by the pound, so this might cost a few cents versus this will cost like $5. You know, it's still not expensive, but still it adds up. But anyway, so I'm going to measure the length that I need and then cut it out, or not cut out, but cut it off. Probably be a little longer these bolts because this, I fit in my hand, it fits right, but then I didn't realize I need more room. So it'll be a little longer than that. And yeah, I'm just gonna kind of start bolting things together. And yeah, I'll film it. You'll see what I do. Okay, once you have your threaded rods already cut, you're also going to want to kind of grind the edge with a little bit of the threads just so you can actually screw the nuts on. Unless you have a die that's not broken, then you could use that, probably. Anyway, before I get to actually assembling the handle, I'm going to take these fender washers that I got and bend them to where they'll go around the wood handle. You could just go to a vise and hammer them out, or hell, if you're strong enough, probably take some pliers and bend them by hand. I'm just going to go over to the horn of my anvil and hammer them out real quick. That'll probably be faster in the long run.
Tight, but you don't want to go too tight since this is just wood. It is a very hard wood that can take a beating, which is why I chose it, but too much will still crush it. But I'm also going to take, once they're tight, kind of flatten these out a little bit, just by camera. It's hard to like film and work sometimes at the same time. So if I go off camera quite a bit during this part, or any part really, that's why. I'm going to flatten them. I'll probably take it to the anvil and hammer it flat, but you get the idea. And then on the other side, take another 1.5 inch nuts, screw it on a little ways, put a washer, and then screw this last one down. Want them to be just enough where we have there, and we have enough.
And there you go. Now you have a nice handle. It's pretty solid, not going anywhere. So, but again, I'm gonna wrap it because that really digs in your hand. So from now, what I'm gonna do, a few different wraps I could recommend. You could just do a loose paracord wrap. You could have some sort of fabric wrap, I suppose. Maybe something with a baseball bat grip tape. Just have that or layered something. Again, I'm going to use paracord and then take fiberglass resin and put in it so that way it's rigid. But with that steel core, I think just about anything would work as long as it holds. And since this is kind of an apocalyptic-ish slash made out of what materials you have type build, probably get by with just about anything as long as it's comfortable. So for this, basically, I'm just using this fiberglass resin. There's probably a bunch of resins you can use, but this is something I have, and it's pretty available. Of course, you're going to want to make sure you're using gloves and all that stuff with this stuff. I find out that, I don't know if it's the resin or the hardener, because body filler has the same issue, but it will strip off fingernail polish. So gloves are kind of handy. But basically, mix up some of this, paint it on the bolt or the handle or whatever you want to call it. Then wrap a layer of my cord around it, paint another pretty good layer of resin on top of that, and then wrap that, and then do it, and then my final layer, I'll also put a layer of resin on top of that as well. That's what I got. That seems to be fine. I'm gonna try not to get any on the wood because I kind of have plans for that later, but worst case scenario, I just sand it off.
You want to get the paracord as tight as you can, too. This resin's already...
Okay, so after the epoxy, or not epoxy, after the resin has set, you got yourself already a pretty decent weapon. This is still a bit sticky at the moment. It's currently like a high of 44, but more an average in like the low 30s, and you know, like 16 at night at the moment. So it's still a bit sticky. I'll take it inside to let it finish, you know, curing. I didn't want to bring it inside while it's still fresh because I didn't really want the fumes stinking at my house. Small house, it wouldn't go well. But what I'm going to do now, and this is more optional, I would say this is probably good enough, just if you want to, just finish it up, seal it and all that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, this is, I think, 3/4 inch, 16 gauge flat bar. Yeah, it's just plain steel. What I'm going to do is I'm going to forge a bracket that'll go along the edge here. It'll probably go from the bottom across up to the top, just so it kind of goes against the grain, holding it together. And so, just my grip, when you punch with it, if it goes up or down a little bit, it'll kind of hit the steel as opposed to the wood. And then I'm going to take this chunk of leaf spring, or, well, I'll cut it, but take a chunk of leaf spring, similar to this, probably cut off of this, and forge a stud to go on both ends. So that way I have a hardened steel spike, or not really spike, hardened steel stud on either side, so you get a little more impact against, I don't know, maybe you need to break a car window to save someone inside, or shatter some concrete blocks to impress your friends. Second one's what I'm doing it for. And yeah, just, you know, add a little more to your weapon to make it, you know, a little more interesting. So that is how you make nightsticks. Pretty fun project, pretty easy actually. Took longer, but not because the project was hard. Anyway, you know, hope you enjoyed and, you know, maybe learn how to make your own. Again, it doesn't take as many power tools as a lot of my other projects does. Like you probably just do it with a sandpaper and just a drill if you're patient enough. Especially because the end pieces aren't really necessary. They're just there to give it a little extra punch to it. But again, traditionally they're just made of wood. So yeah, thanks for watching and enjoy and all that.